Okay, next up is going to be Dungeon Walkers 3 by Daniel Scheenhofen. It is 568 pages. It is $4.99. It's available on Kindle Limited, and here's the author's description. Since starting a crew and a relationship with Cyra and Trish, Stern was hopeful and nervous. They'd officially registered their crew, Pawsitively Irregular, and their icon depicting a polydactyl cat's paw. Leaving Darkstone behind, they arrived in Waterrock, settling in to find more crew members. A lucky encounter introduced them to Cammie and Vulk, dwarven siblings, and the two were hesitant but agreed to try a run through the local dungeon. That first run went well, and Cammie and Vulk signed on permanently with Stern's crew. However, the camaraderie was a little lacking, so they spent time in the city training and getting to know one another. By the time they reached the town of Whitewater, they'd started to gel as a unit until both inside and out of the dungeons. As a unit, both inside and out of the dungeons. During their time together, Cammie and Vulk admitted that they were running dungeons to save their mother, who had been fractured when they were children. It was after a night out that Vulk met his future wife, and an old enemy came back into Stern's life. Victor Bloodcoin hadn't forgiven Stern for his son's death, and by using Vulk as a hostage, the old mayor forced a confrontation. Once that unsettled, Victor was dead, Vulk had been freed, and Stern had a goal, calling on his family. He had the dwarves' mothers retrieved and reborn, then brought her to the city. The happy reunion allowed Vulk and his lover to settle down and marry. I'll be honest, all that stuff is like from book 2, so it's kind of a long intro. It continues. Cammie stayed on even though her brother had given up running, and the crew headed towards Mistwood. The writing was nearly on the wall and emotions were running high. They needed to find more crew members and see how that would affect them. They'd find out when they reached the next city. Whoa, that is such a long intro. Like, I'll be honest, that introduction is longer than my entire review. And only that last paragraph really is like, oh, that's what's happening here. So, you know. Okay, this is a slice of life. This is a slice of life story. You're really just following the main character and his group as they go dungeon diving, and they have conflicts with other characters because the main character has a certain visual appearance that reminds us of a war that happened a while ago. People are still on edge about it on a regular, and it's really about that prejudice and those conflicts that occur with other people, and a couple of recurring villains which have kind of been phased out as of like book 2, but are mentioned in this novel description, and that's what it is. So it's in that respect, I've always enjoyed it. It's a good, solid, entertaining story, and there's a lot of people who really enjoy it. It has a polyamorous relationship, like a lot of the other things by this author, but in this particular book, there's no sex scenes. Like, there is some romantic stuff, but there is adult content of like, oh, this is like real relationship that involves talk of being attracted to one another and kind of fade to black scenes occasionally. But overall, that's a very small section of the story. Most of it is just kind of this dungeon diving slice of life nature, but trying to find other groups in this particular instance to add into his now shortened group, since someone in the group left at the last book. That's what the story is. It's the beginning of the story, I'd say, wasn't as engaging as I would have liked, but by the time it hits about 20% in, rather, it's off to good adventuring again, and I really enjoyed it. In this particular entry, there is an addition of another irregular into this grouping, and I really enjoyed the fact that there was an opportunity to explore this condition from someone else's perspective besides the main characters. All this time we've seen, oh, this is how he is reacted to as he goes to these towns, goes and meets these people. It was nice to see someone else's perspective and how they either had it worse or better, or their own particular issues. And I enjoyed sort of the combined benefit of having more than one irregular in a group. I thought, oh, that's a nice bonusy game thing happening there because of this. So I'm like, oh, good stuff. And of course, you get plenty of progression as they do at the end of each dungeon dive. They get a chance to upgrade their abilities or skills if they've accrued enough. I forget what they're called in the book, like points or whatever, or crystals, or they can use some of those things to help other people who have died and get reborn and continue on to live. In addition to that, There is some interesting story twist that relates to some of the author's other series, which I'm not going to spoil, but I like the path that it's leading to and the potential for opening up this game universe to bigger threats that are outside of its normal conditions. So I thought it was kind of a neat ending there at the end. So for me, really solid story, gets a score of 7.5 out of 10, which is just, solid, good, middle gooding here. And that's Dungeon Walkers 3 with a score of 7.5 out of 10.